2. Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com. It can be heard each Thursday evening live here on the Inception Radio Network. So I just want to know, are you feeling tired, run down, or just out of sorts? Well, do stop by soulhealer.com and find out about all of the products and services that I offer that can help you experience health, healing, and wholeness in your life. A couple of little reminders. We still have a few slots left over for our In the Foots of Viracocha tour to Peru. So if you are thinking about joining myself and Brian Forrester on this exciting adventure where we're going to use remote viewing to tap into the energy of the ancestors while we get to touch like elongated heads and megalithic structures and learn about the history of the area, it is going to be a very exciting trip. It's scheduled for June 1st through 12th. If you're interested, go to the Just Energy Radio webpage. There's a giant banner at the top and click through and get some more information and then sign up. Also, I just want to let you know, I haven't talked about it because I've been so busy talking about the Peru trip, but our new book, my new book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, has been just getting really good reviews from people. It's been pretty amazing, the feedback we've been getting. And if you haven't gotten a copy and read it, please do get it. When you put something out, you just don't ever know if it's going to be any good. And I don't know. People are saying to us that it is a paradigm-changing book, because we just put the information out there and it just says, here's the information. You make your own decision, but it really makes you start looking at our mythology and our past in a very different way. And even if you don't agree with everything we have to say, it still makes you think. And thinking is a good thing. It uses those brain cells and stuff. And let's see, a couple more announcements. If you want to be kept informed of who's coming up on Just Energy Radio, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter at www.justenergyradio.com. You can access all of our archives there. You can get our archives on our YouTube channel. We have over 2 years worth of archives just on YouTube. Or you can like Just Energy Radio on Facebook. Or you can download the smart app, the Inception Radio smart app, where you can listen to not only this show, but all of the programming here on Inception Radio Network. And actually, I told Jamie, our engineer, that I would make this announcement for the network tomorrow. So this is tomorrow, Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. They are live streaming the Out of This World conference, and I can't remember all of the names of the people speaking there, but I know Stan Friedman's going to be there and Travis Walton and some other people. It's from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. live here on the Inception Radio Network. All you need to do is click on the button and listen to it. And so we're having a little bit of a scheduling issue, and so we're having Frank at least be on for the first hour. He might be on for both hours. Let's see. people kill me. So there's this little email conversation going on in the background between myself and our first hour guest. And it's like, it's already 10 after, hon. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. And we're going to be talking to Frank Huguenard about the science of self-discovery. Now, Frank's been on the show before talking about one of his other films. Today, we're going to be talking about his Beyond Belief film, which I did watch, and it was really, really freaking good. But let me tell you a little bit about Frank, and we'll get him on the air. About 10 years ago, Frank was escorted out the door of the company he worked at by an armed guard. In a quest to make sense of his bewilderment, Frank set out on a spiritual journey to understand the nature of reality and why so many people on this planet are suffering. The end result of this search has been his desire to share with the world his own newfound happiness and how he went about achieving it. So from the website beyondmefilm.com, Frank Huguenard. Hey, Frank, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you doing, Rita?
I am so good, and I'm just very happy. When you emailed me and said, hey, my new film's done, let's get together, I was like, yay!
Well, it's like what you were saying with your new book. When you put something out, you just don't know how it's going to be received. So thank you so much for your kind words.
Well, actually, and I'll be real honest, the film started with this very science-based, scientific method and talking about Einstein and Niels Bohr and all these scientists. And I'm going, well, I kind of didn't think Frank was, such a science kind of guy, but then it shifted and I was like, okay, now, and that was the part that I really enjoyed about it. Like I just opened a new YouTube channel that's called Science and Spirit Meets. Mm-hmm. And, because it's a blend of scientific information mixed with the spiritual, because I don't think that we can have them be two separate yet independent aspects of our life. And that's really what that movie talked about.
That's what the whole movie is about. And I sent you a link to an article that I penned last week. I think you may have read it, mm-hmm. where I'm really trying to look, the Beyond Reason film really puts everything into context and explains to people the history of how we came to view science. And it's a relatively young discipline, really. And then I take that same methodology and I say, okay, look, let's take a look at all the religions and assume that there are some spiritual truths, underneath each one of them. And science is all about looking for, making observations, looking for patterns, and then coming up with theories that explain these patterns. And if we do this across all the great spiritual teachers, and you apply science to religion and spirituality that way, you can get some very deep meaning. That's what I like to think about it as. There's definitely, and before 400 years ago, the scientific realm and philosophy and spirituality were all one thing for thousands and thousands of years.
Well, what separated them? Where did the schism happen?
The schism happened 1,700 years ago at the Council of Nicaea, I think. That's my opinion. But over time, the Vatican in the European continent really was controlling the flow of knowledge and information. And so in the universities and the schools or whatever, you were okay as long as what you were teaching or what you were talking about didn't conflict with the official church doctrine. And if you did, then you were labeled a heretic and, persecuted. And so the separation between church and state or science and religion happened basically around 400 years ago. You had Copernicus, Sir Francis Bacon, Galileo, Newton, Descartes, Laplace, all these guys coming along and really overreacting to the whole situation and coming up with a method that was completely devoid of spirituality, and it became very materialistic. And I don't think there's any coincidence that, by the 1800s, science itself was extremely materialistic, and yet our society is also becoming more and more materialistic.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. You talk about some of these, early forefathers of the scientific method, so to speak, that Newton was an alchemist and, did all kinds of esoteric things that he kind of kept in the closet.
Right, he was forced to. I guess it was Galileo who lived the last 8 years of his life under house arrest for many of the same reasons. There's a great quote. I intersperse quotes throughout the film just to sort of keep the pace of the movie going and keep it interesting. And there's this great quote by Maxwell where he's talking about, basically he's saying science is really, really boring. It sort of gets interesting when you're looking at the history of the scientists, that we're talking about here, and it becomes utterly fascinating. And this is one of the things that I agree with personally, because this making this film has been an education. Science becomes fascinating when you look at the history or the flow of the propagation of ideas over the last few hundred years, and you start to realize, this didn't happen, over the last few thousand years. It's all very relatively young. And, ultimately what happens, you've got this method, which is all based on observation, which is completely destroyed about 110 years ago by relativity and quantum mechanics. And yet, even though the entire substrate of the modern scientific method was shattered by these discoveries, modern science still marches on unabated.
But wouldn't you say that our ancestors, and when I say ancestors, I'm going to throw them definitely pre-Christ, or even more, the more indigenous, what we consider indigenous cultures today are more spiritually based. They don't need the mechanical world, the material world. And so they interact with the world in just a very different way.
Right. You don't have, scientists splicing spider genes into strawberry plants to decrease their freezing temperature by 5 degrees. It's very shocking what scientists are doing.
They're playing God.
They're atheists playing God, the worst combination of fools. And certainly, and one of the points I'm making in the film is that, has science made us happier? And it obviously has not. People are miserable on this planet. We've got all these gadgets, and we've got more and more things in this world pulling us into the world without rather than the world within.
I know. It's really bad when people get really excited when they get the newest iPhone or they get the newest gadget or widget, and it's like, okay, whatever. Even with the whole law of attraction, for example, people, it's actually calmed down, but a few years ago, which I'm sure people were just really into, well, I'm going to use the law of attraction. I can get a new car, or I can get this, or I can get that. And when I use it, I like to try to bring in things like happiness or contentment, because it's going to bring me the money if that's what I need to be happy or content. Kind of a bigger picture.
Exactly. Rhonda Byrne certainly made a lot of money off of trying to sell this idea to people, and a lot of people were willing to try it because it just seems so easy. Oh, I can just attract a new home into my life. And yet, 95% of our thoughts are in the subconscious level. So it takes a little bit more than just using that 5% to wish for a new car or whatever, because, the majority of your thought patterns are buried beneath the surface. And this is where the work needs to get done. And by the time that work gets done, you have no interest in a new car or a new house or whatever.
This is true. Then you just want that happiness thing, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm happy.
For 5 minutes, and then they get bored with whatever made them happy, and it's a addictive cycle.
So I want to totally shift gears here for a second and talk about something that has absolutely nothing to do with your film.
Sweet.
So what do you think about the new Pope?
The Pope? My name is Francis, and the new Pope is Francis, so, that's kind of cool. It's funny, for the first time in my life, I'm fascinated with it. I've been studying even before, Benedict resigned. I've been really really looking into a lot of the history of Christianity over the first 300 or 400 years, really making sure, and looking at again the Council of Nicaea and the arguments between Bishop Athanasius and Arius. Constantine gathered together 318 bishops 1,700 years ago, and they argued for months and months on on creating something called the Nicene Creed, which is just a few paragraphs. It's very short. I actually rewrote it the other day, sort of taking the part of Arius. What would his Nicene Creed would have looked like? And it's fascinating to see that all of Christianity hinges on this one document, which I think they got wrong. And then, of course, because this was the official doctrine of both the Roman government as well as the Christian Catholic Church, all the other documentation that existed at the time, all the different Gospels, the Didache, the Epista Sophia, all these different documents, the ones that didn't match this doctrine were destroyed, and it really created this culture. You talk in your opening of your show, you're talking about energy and thoughts. Everything in this universe is energy, and you apply that to the Nicene Creed, and say that from this point forward, all thoughts relating to Jesus Christ are based on this. This is who he was. He wasn't, he wasn't this. He was, which is basically the opposite of what he was teaching. He was saying, hey, all these things I can do, you can do too. It was completely the opposite. So it's a fascinating thing to me to look at what's going on. And, one of my questions I've had for years is how long has the Vatican known sort of this truth? But in Beyond Belief, my second film, I'm talking about how Jesus trained in India and he brought back all this ancient Vedic knowledge, and of course it was such radical spirituality that he was assassinated for it. And yet Christianity reverted back to a lot of the sort of spiritual values that were there before he had gone to India. And the question is, how long has the Vatican known this? I believe it's sort of like the UFO thing in this country where, the government's been sitting on this secret for 60 years, maybe much longer actually. And a lot of people want to bring the information out into the open, but they don't know how to say, whoops, we've been lying to you for 60 years, or in the Vatican's case, 1,700 years. So, the question is this new Francis going to come out and say, here it is, sorry, we this is what it is. Jesus did this, this Nicene Creed isn't really accurate. And, one of the ironies about Francis is that after St. Francis died, about almost 1,000 years ago, I think 900 years ago, the Vatican came in and killed all of his, all of his followers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because they were too radical? Right.
They couldn't kill him. That would have martyred him. But, once he was sort of out of the way, it's like, okay, let's do away with his crew. So that this new one is coming in as another Francis is, that's I think that's kind of fascinating. And I'm dying for it. The Vatican has 8 miles of libraries underneath. And so all these documents, the Gospel of Mary, we have, I believe, about fragments from 6 pages of the Gospel of Mary. And it looks to be one of the most esoteric books that were removed from the Bible. She appears to be the most highly evolved of all the disciples. So the Gospel of Mary looks like it's an amazing book, and we have to assume that the full version of all these books are underneath the Vatican. And it would be great if we actually got a pope that came along and said, "Hey, you know what? Here it is. Have at it."
Well, that would be nice. When Benedict decided to step down, a bunch of people were, posting things on Facebook like, hey, well, I could be Pope. It's like, well, only if you let other people into the secret underground, Pope library down there to dig around. Because there's, 2,000 years or more worth of history locked up down there. I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, again, before all this, and, he was saying he had a friend who went through seminary school. And so Catholic
priests or whatever, wannabes, as they're going through seminary school, they're given a lot of these books that are not open to the public. And some of them is that Jesus is teaching reincarnation. And so, there's a dichotomy between what the priests are being taught themselves and what they're allowed to teach the congregations. It's, so it's that blatant.
Well, and I just thought, with Francis, he's a Jesuit, and that order of priests tend to be, and I'm just going to say it this way, the most Gnostic of all of the groups, the most, spiritually based and looking for answers on the inside of all of the Catholic groups of priests. And so I think that's going to be interesting. And I was talking to a friend of mine today. He said that he found out that he is actually the first Jesuit priest to ever become pope.
Correct. That's what there's a lot. I mean, it's very interesting. Like I said, I'm for some reason more interested, I guess probably because of my film work, in the procedures and, looking at what Christianity has become based on, what Jesus was really teaching, which was obviously much more Gnostic, and really wanting, the church to come out and say, hey, we got it wrong. So it'd be great if we actually had a new pope come in who was able and capable of making that shift.
Or at least be open to saying, well, those traditions in India, we have parallels in our own traditions, even though we call them different words.
Take original sin. Original sin sounds like something straight out of Greek mythology. It's like, wait a second, how to explain this to me again? Except when you go and you juxtapose original sin and the idea that my ancestors may have done something, and that is reflected in my own mind, my own consciousness, and that needs to be purified. Well, that's karma. That comes straight from India. And if you put it in that context, all of a sudden you say, well, original sin, that's the exact same thing as this, and this is what they're teaching. And you can, again, scientifically map these things and look for patterns. And when you do so, and you look across Islam and Hinduism and Vedanta and Buddhism and Christianity in this way and look at these patterns, they really stand out. Then you look at something like the Nicene Creed and you're like, this is obviously, an abomination, really.
Yeah. I'll share this story with you and everybody else that's listening, since I know they're not listening to the show. So my sister-in-law and I went out. I went home visiting, and so my sister-in-law and I went to the gym, and then we were going to get some lunch, and we were sitting in her car, and she said, can I, read something to you? And so I'm like, sure. So she reaches into the back seat of her car and pulled out this, 50-pound Bible, thunk, and then unzipped it, and then took out a paper and started reading stuff to me. And, the first one was about the gift of healing. I didn't have an issue with that. The second one she read to me was about the gift of prophecy. No, it was about fortune telling. That's where I drew the line. I was like, I don't do fortune telling. So then I stopped her and asked her, what compelled her to read this stuff to me. She goes, well, I just felt like I needed to share this with you. And I said, well, how do you know the work that I do, I'm not being compelled by God to do too? 3 hours later, we got out of the car. And it was a great conversation. It was a 3-hour long conversation. But one of the things that she finally gleaned, and I'm kind of hoping that, Catholics will glean, Christians will glean, is that when you say things like you're doing energy work, or you're doing a reading, or you're doing things, you're doing Tai Chi or yoga, God forbid, that it's not the work of the devil.
For meditation, Jesus meditated 20,000 hours in his life, and Christians don't meditate. And they all say it's evil. It opens up doors to negative energies, and it's crazy.
Then you'll be doing drugs, and then you'll be out on the street. It's just all awful.
It's the work of the devil. You meditate, and you open yourself up to the devil, and it's quite
anything.
Sad.
And if anything, that is the furthest from the truth. It helps to create and maintain your boundaries that the devil, quote unquote, can't get in. Anyway.
Anyway. And by the way, everybody listening, all this, I go into a lot of detail. I basically get into, I sort of manufactured a sparring debate between me and a professor from Yale, deciphering some of the Gospel of Thomas. It's kind of amusing, but Beyond Belief is all about Jesus going to India and actually, after the crucifixion, going back to India and living there till he's 100 years old or thereabouts.
Okay, well, we're going to shift gears out of that whole little area. But let me just say, so we're talking to Frank Huguenard. His webpage is beyondmefilm.com. We're talking about his new movie, Beyond Reality. So I think I want to handle this question this was in the middle of the movie, but I think I want to go here first and then kind of back out. Because one of the things that you talk about is Vedanta.
Vedanta, right. Mm-hmm.
And what is that? Because it seems like that word, which is obviously an Indian word, kind of encompasses where we're going to be going in this conversation.
Sure. So most people nowadays are familiar with the word Ayurvedic medicine, or the Vedas. So the Vedas are 4 books, the oldest of which is Rig Veda, and they're, nobody knows how old, and some people say they're hundreds of thousands of years old. We don't know. They were transcribed and written down maybe 5,000 years ago. And the Vedas are some 18,000 books or something like that. They're so large. It's such a large volume of information that no one single person could possibly learn it all in one lifetime. This is what's said. And it has everything from life sciences, which is what Ayurvedic means, to astronomy and astrology, to spirituality. And so the end of the Vedas are a set of books called Upanishads, which are the highest spiritual knowledge. And Anta in Vedas, of course, is Veda. It's interesting. Veda is the Sanskrit word, and it means to know or knowledge. It has a double meaning, just like the word science has a double meaning. It means both knowledge as well as a way of acquiring knowledge. Anta is the Sanskrit word for the end of, or the conclusion of. And so Vedanta represents the highest spiritual knowledge. And also in the same way, it represents the knowledge as well as a way of attaining it, a practical way of going about getting it. Most people don't realize this, and most people don't even know what the word Vedanta is. But Buddhism is sort of a watered-down form of Vedanta. So when you're talking about Buddhism, you're talking about Vedanta. In this country, we have a number of organizations where you can go and learn, again, both the knowledge as well as the practices that'll lead you to those inner awakenings. Probably the most famous is Transcendental Meditation, the TM organization. That's tm.org. Self-Realization Fellowship. Paramahamsa Yogananda came here 110 years ago, and this is the organization he started. Vipassana, which is a Buddhist discipline in this country, is there. Vedanta Society is in most major cities in the country. And the other organization that teaches Vedanta is the one that I'm a part of, which is the Art of Living Foundation, artofliving.org. So you can go to any number of these different organizations and learn on the knowledge side as well as, the practical side, which includes meditation, different asanas, all these different things. Vedanta, one last thing, Vedanta over the years has grown a little bit, the definition of it, to include not only Upanishads, but Bhagavad Gita, which is a story of Arjuna and Krishna about 5,000 years ago, as well as different commentaries, different interpretations on Upanishads, most lamely by Shankaracharya about 1,300 years ago. So that's what Vedanta is.
And so why would we want to do this or explore this in the general sense of the word? I mean, is there a goal? I mean, like for me, I love anything old, and the older the better. And once you get to the Greeks, I'm really not interested in it anymore. And so I can understand it from a historical perspective, but, it sounds like there's stuff you have to do, so why, what's the point?
So there's two answers to this question, and the first answer, and this is sort of supposed to be subliminally put into the film Beyond Reason, and that is, have you ever seen a quark or a neutrino?
No.
Right. I haven't either. How do we know that these subatomic particles exist? If you wanted to really verify it for yourself, you could spend the next 10 years getting a PhD and then getting some postdoctorate work, eventually making it to CERN in Australia or in Switzerland, working at the CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, and look, there's a quark. Now I know for sure. But if you don't want to go through all that process, you look at published reports from scientists who've done all that work. And they say, look, here's what it is, and this is the theory that describes that there's going to be a quark here, and then we've done the experiment, and yes, there's the quark. So much in the same way, if you don't want to go through this whole process of becoming self-realized and spending the next 20 years meditating and all these different things, you can accept the things like, for instance, reincarnation as a working hypothesis, because you've got all this body of knowledge, all these spiritual scientists, these spiritual masters before us who've come through and said, here's the reincarnation is a part of our energetic existence. So we, again, like the start of your show, talking about everything's energy, we go from one lifetime to another, and we're collecting impressions and we're purifying impressions. And this is a major mechanism in the driving of all of our personal behaviors and traits and tendencies. So, part of the point that I'm trying to make in the film here is, you don't have to become self-realized, but you can take a look at what all the great scientists have said, Buddha, Krishna, Christ, all these people. And of course, Christ did talk about reincarnation, which was all removed from the Bible. And accept it as, and you don't have to accept it as fact per se. You can just look at it as a scientific model and say, okay, here's consciousness, here's how the mind works, here's impressions, here's karma. Reincarnation is an integral part of this. I'll accept that as a working hypothesis and then go through and come up with a theory and test it. This is the scientific way of going forward. The other half of the answer to this question is, again, from original sin to karma to Buddhism, what drives all of our traits and tendencies, all the things we do, what drove that woman in your car to get out this book and start reading things about fortune tellings, all the different patterns that make people want to go buy the newest and latest gadget, the things that lead to gambling addictions and spousal abuse, all the things in our society are all because of these exact same mechanisms. And so what Vedanta teaches, and again, through any number of different disciplines, Buddhism or TM or Art of Living, you learn how to remove those impressions that are causing you so much suffering in this life. So that's sort of the practical answer on why you would want to apply these techniques and this knowledge.
But why would you want to reach like this transcendental truth? I just sorry, I'm playing a little devil's advocate here, so I hope you realize that. I just kind of get the impression that, we'll do this stuff and then we'll realize we're in the Matrix, which would be bad.
Imagine an orgasm, the sensation of an orgasm. Experience something 1,000 times the intensity of an orgasm, lasting for over an hour. That's what I do every day in meditation. I'm outside of the Matrix. You're experiencing the truth. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So apart from the fact that, and that's just sort of a side effect. I know that based on what I've been taught, that when you're doing those things, you're removing things, and we're part of the Matrix. We can't just escape. We're here for a reason, and we're here for the duration. You can meditate, you can do all these other things, but the idea is that when you experience the truth, then you are able to drop fear, because all fear basically boils down to, in one way or another, the fear of death. And so if you're able to remove the fear of death because you understand that this is a matrix, then you can live life to its fullest. You don't need to be fear. All those little secondary fears really are based on the fear of death.
One of the things, I'm going to ask you this because I have never really had somebody to ask this to, and you seem like the perfect person that would have a good answer. One of the things that you hear a lot in Hindu tradition is about letting go of the illusion. What does that mean?
Letting go of the illusion. In fact, again, this goes back to my scientific model, but there's a very simple definition of truth that I can't find a problem with. And the definition of truth that I like is the truth is that which doesn't change. Anything that changes isn't real. So yeah, this is a matrix. Everything that we're doing, this conversation isn't happening. You and I aren't really here. But if you can let go and see this is an apparent reality, that's the play and display of all these vibrations, and you can see that for what it is, then you're not getting stuck, and your small mind is not getting caught up in the ephemeral. You're not chewing on this little problem you're having at work, or all these little micro dramas in your life. If you see them for what they are, which is just a movie, it's just a play. If you can see yourself, basically, this is a great big movie that we're in. And if you see it like that, and you can just let go of the fact that it's not really real, then you can move through it much more gracefully.
So, like, if somebody pisses you off at work, you're able to kind of take a step back and not let it, like, stick to you almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you brought in Hinduism, which is a little, something I know a lot about, but it's also, Hinduism is a culture. I don't know if you know that. Are you familiar with the history of the name Hinduism?
No.
There was in the fertile part of India thousands of years ago was called the Indus Valley. And so the first discoverers that went there called them Indus because it was the Hindu Valley. So it was just sort of a designation of the people, the culture, the beliefs, the rituals. It's a very massive topic when you talk about Hinduism. There's some branches of Hinduism that are atheistic, and there's, it's quite broad. So I personally tend to shy away from using Hinduism, talking about, Vedanta is a much more sort of purified form of it. But in any event, when someone pisses you off at work and you recognize you're in the movie, not only do you just sort of let it move through you quicker and you just realize, okay, this isn't, this is just a movie, but you also understand that happening is a manifestation of what's going on inside of you. So it's the movie is creating itself in real time for you to observe and to understand that, oh, this is what's, I'm supposed to learn something from this. That person's, causing me to be angry. Well, that's my own anger. That I actually, he's just an excuse. He's bringing it to the surface. It's not really him making me angry. I'm already angry. There's just something happening in this movie going around me to bring up these emotions. So that's more of a comprehensive way of looking at it.
Okay. Because I remember reading like Mayor Baba years ago and a bunch of stuff, and they would always talk about like Dharma and, illusions. And I always would go, but what does that mean? It all seems pretty real to me. Because there is this physical world, and even though, like me personally, I realize that there are worlds outside of this physical world, but we're still kind of trapped here. So is doing these practices, does it help us, escape from this world? I'm not sure if I phrased that right. But
I would use the word graduate.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, it's like this is a classroom. And some of us are just held back a few times. Some of us more than others. And, it's taken us, thousands and thousands of years to develop the consciousness, the mind that we have, We've lived many lives. And, ultimately, and Buddha called this an illness, right? Samsara. It's this continuing birth, life, death cycle over and over and over and over again. And the end game, if you will, is graduation. You purify your mind. You remove all these impressions on your consciousness that have taken eons and eons to form, so you can move into those higher realms. And then occasionally someone will come, some Master Jesus, for instance, who has already graduated, but sometimes you have a choice. At least this is what I'm taught, that occasionally someone will come back in times of need, because not because they've flunked out and they're being held back, but because they're coming on their own free will to come and lift up humanity again. And seems like right now we could use a little lifting up.
Well, it's interesting because with the whole 2012 phenomena, that's a good word, there's this whole camp of people that talk about, there were the gloom and doomers and we're all going to die. But we had Happy Mayan Fool's Day here on Just Energy Radio. It was pretty fun. But then there are the people that talk about, we're going to transcend this physical body and we're going to enter the fifth dimension and we're going to do this stuff. But it's kind of sounding like the only way we're going to be able to achieve that is if we are engaging in some kind of spiritual practice to elevate our personal energy.
That's right. That's why... you asked about, you actually asked a very good question, and everybody, especially if you look again at the Roman Empire sort of creating a religion, if you will, and looking at how many people there's so many people in this country who are around the world really who are really spiritually curious, but at the same time extremely leery of anything organized. Because for a variety of reasons, and so you're asking why something old, why Vedanta, why this, why that, and to me, I look at pedigree. If you look at the entire fabric of spiritual practices and practitioners and teachers and disciplines and techniques. You can look at it as sort of the university system where you've got online courses and community colleges, and you've got Stanford and Yale and Harvard and all these different places, and the pedigree of these different organizations. I mean, if you were to tell me, Frank, you need to start taking spiritual practices, go become a Catholic, I'd be saying, well, okay, that sounds great, blah blah blah. Take Jesus.
Do they have spiritual practices? That's
my point. It's like, okay, the Catholic thing is take Jesus Christ as your Savior, Lord Jesus Christ, and He died on the cross for my sins, and and that's it. And no, they don't have spiritual practices. And then you look around, and then some, you can go do some weekend seminars for a variety of people in this country who, there may be some truths to what they're teaching, and they may have some effects. Some of the effects may be short-lived or longer-lived. You don't know. But to me, for my money. And, you can tell I'm a sort of a scientifically minded person, and I'm a diehard skeptic, right? And a good scientist has to be. They have to be very open-minded. At the same time, they have to be very skeptical and not really not being gullible. And for my money, Vedanta is the highest pedigree of any spiritual practices, training, knowledge on the planet. And so, I think if the planet's going to go through this portal dimension, fifth dimension, David Wilcock stuff, I don't know, it's going to have to go through Vedanta. That seems obvious to me.
Do you know who Michael Cremo is?
I do, yeah.
And so like his one book, Human De-Evolution, talks about how we're spiritually we're going downhill and we're becoming denser and denser in our reality the more materialistic we become. Mm-hmm. To me, I really appreciate what you're saying, because to me, my personal belief is that the ancients knew a whole lot more about the other world, the non-necessarily physical world, or how the spiritual world, the energetic world interacts with the physical world. I mean, just they knew more stuff. And so to me, the older the tradition is, the less corrupt and dogmatized the tradition is, the purer it is. And it sounds like this tradition hasn't been dogmatized. I can't really think of another word.
No, it's very anti-dogmatic. In fact, they're a great place to start would be Swami Vivekananda. He came here about 120 years ago. Legend has it, or I have it on fairly good authority that he reincarnated into Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. But anyway, if you read the complete works of Vivekananda, it's fascinating stuff. And you look at it, how well he explains. And this is the one thing that's amazing when I'm reading Vivekananda is that I have to remind myself constantly that he's talking in 1893, 1895, because the words in this book are so contemporary. It's so nicely written. And he's saying, look, anytime anybody asks you to believe anything, run for the hills. We're not asking you to believe anything. Here's the theory. Here's the axioms and the definitions and the hypotheses. You work it out for yourself. And here's the methods and techniques. And here's the theory. And you can use these methods and techniques and protocols to either prove or disprove the theory. But you don't really have a right as a scientist to sit back and say, well, I'm not going to try that, and I think it's hogwash. You should at least be willing to say, sure, this is a scientific process. The one thing in spirituality, of course, that sets it apart from everything else scientific is that the results are personal. I can't sit there and publish peer-reviewable kind of results from my scientific experiment. I can go and have my own self-enlightenment experience. You can have yours, etc.
But we can have experiences, in the mass part. It's interesting because I just think that scientists actually, hang on, I wrote this down. I had to rewind. I was watching the movie on my tablet and, and so the button's really small and I'm rewinding it and I'd go back 10 minutes and wait for the part to come back. And so let's see. And they were talking about, the scientific method and it being subject to verification and change. And then it says, this is the part that I had to write down. What we believe is subject to verification and change. It brings with it, the topic brings with it a whole lot of evidence. Oh,
right. You can have 1 million people verify something, but that doesn't mean it's right. It means that you've got a ton of weight, the weight of the world of evidence that needs to be overcome to prove that the next paradigm is actually right and the old one was gone. But just because you have that huge body of evidence, that doesn't make it right. I believe that's the quote you're talking about, yeah?
Right, exactly. But he was making it sound like, if they have a whole body of evidence that shows that gravity works, but then somebody comes out with a different theory, they have to show beyond a preponderance of evidence that this new theory is correct. I mean, I get that. But there are things in our world or, that are reported in our world that in my little, Dr. Rita humble opinion, there is a huge preponderance of evidence, for things like ghosts, for things like psychic ability, for things like reincarnation.
You can never, ever, ever in a billion years prove reincarnation using the modern scientific method. And so what scientists do, they say, well, we're going to ignore that. It doesn't fit into what our model of science, of what our model of the acquisition of knowledge defines as acceptable, and so it can't be. And if you look at, again, my first film, Beyond Me, which talks about personality disorders and animal instincts, I mean, modern psychology can never look at, consciousness in this way because reincarnation is not part of their equation because of the modern science method. It's unfortunate. It's given us some really nice devices, but it's really limited And you'd mentioned Michael Cremo, and he talks about this extensively in his first book on Forbidden Archaeology. And I've run into this. I've screened my new film to professors, And, if you watch Beyond Reason, some of it feels like you're in a lecture hall. It's got that academic feel to it. But I thought at least talking to some college professors, I would have this great, intellectual conversation with them afterwards. And this one guy hated the film, and he was an amazingly brilliant Vedantic expert. I mean, I thought, great, he's going to watch this film, he's going to love it, we're going to have coffee, da-da-da-da-da. And he hated it. And it's exactly the sort of dogmatized scientism that Grimo ran into in his career, that the whole academic community is actually more dogmatic than Catholicism. It's frightening. And so things like ghost or reincarnation and stuff, it's such an outside it's so outside of what they're acceptably, any self-respecting scientists can talk about, that they don't even thinking about it, personally, not to mention talk about it publicly. Otherwise their career would be over. So the scientists, academics are extraordinarily closed-minded. It's a non-starter.
I know, but it just seems so redundant because, they themselves will put out the belief that we're here to discover new things, strange new worlds, and it's like, no, you're not.
No, you're not. No, it's horrible. And Michael experienced it. I've experienced it. I don't know if you have, but until you look at it and it's shocking to see how, this was at a local university in town where I'm living in North Carolina now, and I'm wanting to. I'm wanting to screen my film on campus and share this knowledge, and I'm thinking this is great, and they have no interest in opening up new doors. And in fact, this guy went out of his way to make sure my films were never screened on campus. And he was saying they're new age crap and da 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 da. And there's not. I mean, you've seen the film. There's not one single frame of new age anything in my film. It's 4,000-year-old knowledge that he's an expert on. And yet, for him, it was just another "what the bleep do we know?" And it's really it's frightening.
Well, there are people that are interested in that.
Yeah, in what?
What the bleep do we know? And the esoteric part, and bringing science and spirituality together.
Absolutely.
Well, I just find that fascinating because. You don't have to say which of the guys you're talking about that was in the film, but they both seemed very open to the concept of blending science and spirit, even though in their professional life they're not really able to do that because of academic constraints and the
Right. So there's a couple of quick things here. No, the guy I screened it with was here. He wasn't in the film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the two guys that are in the film, it was great. I mean, I was so blessed to find Kenny Felder. If anybody watches the film, he's just freaking brilliant. And it turns out and it's funny. I've been working on Beyond Reason. Beyond Me took me 8 weeks start to finish. Bada boom, bada bing. It was finished. Received very well. Beyond Belief was also 8 weeks. This one I've been working on 18 months, and I was struggling to find a quantum physicist who could. Talk about things the way I wanted them to talk about. And I traveled to India, spent 4 months talking to some of the world-renowned experts on Vedanta, and I got into arguments with them and these great swamis and gurus, and I'm not going anywhere. And finally, I realized, actually, I moved to North Carolina last summer. I realized, actually, there's some smart people here. I guess I was kind of a California snob with Berkeley and Stanford and stuff, and it never occurred to me So I did this Google search, North Carolina quantum physicist, Kenny Felder's webpage came up, and I looked at it, and it was perfect. The stuff he's talking about, because he's talking about Buddhism, and he's talking about quantum physics. So I emailed him, an hour later, he emails back, yeah, I'd love to be in your film, but I'm in Boston for the year. I don't care. I'm coming up. So I drove up there that weekend, drove up there, and I've been interviewing for a year. And the good news is that all those other interviews I did, all the traveling, all the reading and researching prepared me for that moment. So, and you can see that comes out in the film. And I start filming him. He's brilliant. First question, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's, he can look into the camera, and he's compelling, and he's charismatic, and he's knowledgeable, and everything I wanted. And I get back here, And I email him and say, okay, great, perfect. I'm good making the film now. What title should I give you in the film? He goes, high school teacher, Raleigh-Durham Charter High School. And I'm like, what? I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't put high school teacher in this film. I'm going to be laughed out of, whatever, this guy. But this is how funny. And I would have never driven. It was like a 1,800-mile drive round trip to go to Boston. I would have never made that trip had I known he was a high school teacher. And this is how funny the mind is, because the guy's brilliant. And even after I knew how good he was, I was like, well, can I put high school teacher in? So it's quite amazing. But at the same time, this is why he's able to go out on a limb and talk about things scientifically without worrying about his credentials and his CV, because most college professors really don't want to cross those lines because it's the end of their career.
I know, and that's just such a shame, especially these days. The last 30 years, 40 years, there has been so much material that has been made public, made available, people digging into areas that have not been touched, looked at in millennia, and reevaluating it. Even my book, it looks at mythology and kind of, anyway, but no one has been looking at it before. We had to get to a certain point in our understanding of the nature of reality in certain aspects, the scientific nature of reality, so we could look at some of the material that comes out of these spiritual principles, like energy and non-locality and string theory and all of this stuff, and go, well, wait a minute. They were talking about that 5,000 years ago.
Well,
they're not crazy people.
That's the amazing part about it. There's legends in the Bhagavad Gita that they blew up a nuclear bomb, and there's physical evidence on the planet on this battlefield that the radioactive materials are way higher than they're supposed to be. And they understood the nature of the atom 5,000 years ago, not by using subatomic, microscopes or whatever, or high energy particle colliders. But by just calming the mind and being able to observe these things with just our minds. Mm-hmm. And science doesn't look at that now and say, wow, how did they do that? That's amazing. One thing is 80-90% of all the great scientific discoveries have not come through sort of laboratory and, have not come through the scientific method. The overwhelming majority of all the great scientific discoveries have come through intuition. And yet science can't even tell you what intuition is.
Mm-hmm. Inspiration, not perspiration, as they say.
Absolutely.
But the part that's interesting is that while they might get their insights through intuition or inspiration, but then where does that come from? It's not the act of intuiting, but where does that inspiration come from? I believe it comes from God, but where, and they won't even touch that question.
You can't say that word in a laboratory, right? Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I just made it up,
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just kind of sad.
It's and the funny thing is I had gone on this quest for quantum physicists to find. I wanted to get on record a quantum physicist talking about the fact that with the collapse of the wave function, which is the big mystery to this day inside quantum mechanics, they don't understand what causes the collapse of wave function, and it's the Heisenberg principle. It's the fact that there's an observer on some experiment causes the outcome of the changes the result of the experiment. And so all the early pioneers in quantum mechanics, Bohr, Einstein, Heisenberg, Wigner, Schrödinger, all these guys concluded that the factor in their equation that causes the collapse of the wave function was consciousness, this idea of consciousness. And so I went out looking all I wanted to get was a physicist to say that. Yeah, what causes the collapse of the wave function is consciousness. Great, bada boom, bada bing. And what I found out, and this is brought out in the film, that you can't get a quantum physicist to say that these days. That in a lot of ways in the last 40 or 50 years, quantum mechanics has gone backwards because you can't get any scientist to admit they don't know what causes the collapse of the wave function, but they don't want to say it's consciousness because then they're going to be perceived as, kooks or conspiracy theorists or whatever.
Lynn McTaggart. You know her?
Of course.
I think her work, the intention experiment, what is the impact of intention on different things, and it would just be so cool if physicists, observing wave functions or electrons flying around or whatever, did some intention experimentation, like have the observer, be in a bad mood or have them be in a good and excited mood or whatever, have the intention that it has a certain kind, it spins to the left as opposed to spins to the right. I don't know. I am so not a physicist.
No, this is good.
It would just be so cool if they would maybe take it under consideration.
There are some out there. I forget this guy in Arizona. I think his name's Gary Schwartz, I believe. Rupert Sheldrake, of course, with his morphinogenic field theories.
Right.
Bill Tiller in New Mexico, I believe now. He was, I think he was in What the Bleep. These guys are there. There are scientists working on these, and they're trying to devise more and more sophisticated experiments, trying to block out all the different kind of gamma rays and X-rays from the thing that they're observing to see what intention is changing. But these guys are mostly on the on the fringe and not heavily respected. Of course, we all respect them because they're doing interesting work. But the question is, does Lynn's or Gary's or Bill's papers get published in Nature journal or all these scientific journals, and then they don't.
I'm sorry, I'm just shaking my head. Just,
it's okay.
It's just so sad, and it kind of leaves me speechless that there's, I'll say it this way, such censorship, even in academia.
But, I saw it a month ago or roughly, with this professor. And, he didn't even think he would. I wish I could have recorded it. It was so bizarre to see basically academic censorship that this was, and this guy was a know-it-all. He was brilliant. And yet he knew nothing, He just was really book smart and yet had no practical experience to speak from. He just could argue every different philosophy in the world. And yet he's never experienced anything in meditation or anything else to make him believe, that any of this is true. And it's everywhere. It's, of course, in the mainstream media. It's in academia. It's in our educational institutions. Is it censorship? Is it just a dogmatized society we live in? If you look at how science, really evolved over the last 400 years conceptually from one idea to the next. And I try to really cover this in the film. And you try to understand that as that evolution happened from Cartesian dualism to Laplacian determinism and positivism in the 1800s, how that school of thought got indoctrinated into our educational institutions, you can see how our entire society is built on that paradigm. And is that censorship or is that just programming and conditioning? But it's got to crumble. It's not sustainable the way it is. It's all false.
Well, that's because it's all an illusion, Frank.
That's what makes it fun.
Okay. But if things in our physical world aren't real, then what is real? Or at least what do the ancients say is real? We'll go with their word.
Like I said, what the truth is that which doesn't change. What changes isn't real. So what's real is what's permanent is I hate to say it, but God is love. That the substrate for all existence is just love. Love is not an emotion, it's your very existence. It's just love. And so when I'm able to meditate and close my eyes and sit and turn off, find the off switch for my emotions, turn off my ego, turn off my intellect, turn off my memories, and still my mind until I'm experiencing nothing but the truth. All I'm experiencing is pure love. It's phenomenal. It's really great.
But it sounds like with what you're saying, I mean, I like, say that again, everything that is the same is real.
No.
I think I need to write that down.
Anything that changes is not real.
Okay. So, for example, I'm kind of like bringing it home here. So, like, what I see with me on a personal level is that, I'm usually a pretty happy, definitely goofy person. People think I'm really smart. Whatever. Anyway, I like to read a lot of weird stuff, and it just sticks. And that it has always been. That's me. And but then you have a good day, you have a bad day, whatever. And so what I'm hearing you say is that happy, kind of goofy person is the real me. And when I'm in a funk or I'm feeling kind of depressed, that's not the real me. That's the part of the
I don't
illusion.
even want to touch that.
Okay. I was just trying to make an example.
No, I think that's partially true, but to me, there's something that doesn't quite. Let me just apply it to myself, and you can, you can juxtapose it accordingly. Because I also go through those. I'm famous for people who know me of swinging back and forth between some of these extremes, and I think when I'm goofy and happy, there's a lot of personality there. And ultimately, the more you meditate, the more your personality is, you're saying goodbye to your personality. That doesn't mean you're not an interesting person to be around or that kind of thing, or that you're boring. In fact, it's sort of the opposite. But a lot of those exterior things, the traits and tendencies that come out aren't necessarily, if you're sort of manic depressive and you're a manic, that doesn't mean that's just sort of love shining through. That's just, that's just because there's a pendulum swinging back and forth. Am I making any sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you want to be just there in the center and get grounded and just be in love the whole time.
Well, we were supposed to take a commercial break like 10 minutes ago, but we were in such a good conversation that I forgot. So let's take a quick commercial break, and I'm not sure what we're going to talk about when we come back, but we'll be back. So we'll be back with Frank Huguenard, the director of Beyond Reality and the Beyond Me film series, beyondmefilm.com, after these words from our sponsors.
Dr. Rita Louise will return right after these messages.
Day in civilization is wrapped in time, magic, and mystery. According to legend, the creator god Viracocha emerged from Lake Titicaca and created the first inhabitants of the land. They were a group of giants who were tasked to move the massive stones for their many building projects. These giants grew unhappy and revolted. Because they were disobedient, Viracocha destroyed them and created a new race, mankind. Who were the ancient stone builders of Peru? What was their purpose in creating these mind-boggling monuments? What secrets do these unexplained artifacts hold? Join Ancient Aliens, Brian Forrester and I on the Science and Spirituality Tour. Explore firsthand these great building enigmas. Unlike any other sacred tour, you will learn how to use remote viewing and other intuitive techniques to tap into the powerful energies of these ancient sites and commune with ancestral spirits. For those who choose, soar over the lines of Nazca and connect with one of the tantalizing elongated skulls of Paracas. For more information about this exciting once-in-a-lifetime experience, visit www.soulhealer.com.
Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here for Inception Radio Network's Facebook page. If you can, go to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like us. And if you can, share it with others. The more we grow on Facebook, the faster we grow. With your help, we can do it. And we thank you ahead of time. Facebook.com/Inception Radio Network, or just search Inception Radio Network on Facebook. Take care.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
Are you sensitive to energy? Want to explore the world beyond the five senses? Looking for a new career as an alternative healthcare practitioner? Then the Institute of Applied Energetics, Medical Intuition, and Energy Medicine training programs may be right for you. Our comprehensive curriculum provides students with a deep understanding of how to detect, evaluate, and transform the subtle body, as well as techniques for correcting energetic imbalances that may underscore a person's ability to experience radiant health. So if you are sensitive to energy, contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Visit www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and start your new career today. Who were the gods of antiquity? They've been described as the forces of nature, levels of consciousness, and aspects of our psyche. Stories that depict their incredible weapons, their flying machines, and their amazing adventures are characterized as being the product of our ancestors' fanciful imaginations. But what if the tales of the gods are true? Did the writers, chroniclers, and scribes of our distant past actually document a realistic view of our origin? My latest book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, looks at our most ancient legends. Learn of the torrid romances, elaborate plots, violent scandals, and conspiracies that played out in antiquity. Find out the role the gods played in the life and culture we have today. If you want to find out the truth of who we are and where we come from, order your copy of Man-Made today. For more information, go to www.manmadethechronicles.com. That's www.manmadethechronicles.com.
You're tuned into Inception Radio Network, bringing you the very best alternative news, interviews, and more. 100% quality, 24/7, 365 for the last 3 years.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Just Energy Radio can be heard live here on the Inception Radio Network every Thursday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can discover all the products and services I offer. So please do stop by. And also, if you want to be kept informed of the guests we have coming up on the show, please do go to the Just Energy Radio webpage, where we have over 6 years worth of archives. We have just started putting the YouTube video on the site, so we don't have very many of those yet on the site, but you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel, Just Energy Radio. You can like Just Energy Radio on Facebook, or you can download the Inception Radio app, and you can listen to the show while you're in your car driving around. How cool is that? And one last quick announcement, starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Inception Radio Network, they're doing a live stream of the Out of This World conference that's being held in somewhere, I don't even know, a little podunk somewhere in Texas. We had to look it up on the map, and I live in Texas. It's that little in podunk. But it's going to be live here on the Inception Radio Network, and so all you need to do is tune into the show, which is why you need it on your phone, to listen. Stan Friedman, or I just brain farted, but I think the web page, Jamie, are you there? The web page is outofthisworld.com.
Well, they can find most of the information at roswellbooks.com. The speakers are Stanton Friedman, Travis Walton, Noe Torres, Dr. Robert Gross, and a few others. So, yeah, they could check it out there. And I believe outofthisworld.com might be up. I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that. If so, I'll post it in the chat.
Okay, great. So we have been talking to Frank Huguenard about his movie Beyond Reason, Not Beyond Reality, Beyond Reason. But actually, we're going to talk a little bit about his film set, because now it's a 3-part set. It's the Beyond Me Films, which goes along with his webpage, beyondmefilm.com. So, Frank, let's kind of start here. Why did you even decide to start this whole film, this trilogy film project in the first place?
So, I've been meditating. Again, I've been with Art of Living Foundation, and I encourage everybody. If anyone would have known me 10 years ago and would see me today, they would go to artofliving.org immediately and sign up for the course. It's a very powerful technique, and it really incorporates a lot of things that work into our daily lives. In any event, I've been meditating about 10 years, and after about 4 years only, I started having these really amazing meditations I was talking about. So first thing I did was write a book called Beyond Me, and that took a few years, and I never published it, but I tried to really, again, take all this science and spirituality and combine it. And then 2.5 years ago, sort of on a whim, and I have a, background in high tech. I was a software engineer for 20 years, and so that's a whole nother phone call. But so it turns out that making a documentary film is a lot like writing software. At least for me, it is. So I was able to apply a lot of the same methodology, and the tools are a little bit different, but it's sort of like that. In any event, I kind of knew what I wanted to do with this, take the knowledge in this book. And someone asked me, why do you want to publish a book? And I thought, sort of simultaneously, I had two distinct thoughts: to help people, and I'll make a documentary film. It was sort of simultaneous. It was like, okay, whatever, I'll just do a film. And so with no training or background or money or experience or help, I did everything by myself. Within 8 weeks, I had released Beyond Me, which really is all I want people to watch. I mean, it's fascinating. Something most people wouldn't know by looking at it is a lot of the brilliance that comes out of the film actually comes from me sort of dissecting my past interpersonal relationships with girlfriends and my wife, and looking at the cycles of behavior that we get in, and so that's what that film's about, and that has really everything in it that people need to see. And it didn't get viewed 20 million times in the first week and a half, and I was pretty disappointed with that. It was a little bit delusional, I think. So then, a few months later, and I thought I was finished. Like I said, it just has so much information in it. I ran into some guy in India this last trip who had watched Beyond Me 15 times, and I mean, I'm gonna get choked up and start, getting misty-eyed talking about this. But he came over and was, touching my feet, and he gave me a hug and just completely lost it and just broke down. And there's a lot of things on my testimonial page that people have written to me about the film. Anyway, about 2 years ago, I had another inspiration that I wasn't, that I needed to make more films to get people to watch the first one. And so in one inspiration, I came up with two names, Beyond Belief and Beyond Reason, even before knowing what those films were going to be about. So that's kind of cool. So again, Beyond Belief, I started looking into reincarnation and Jesus and where that missing information went, and I compiled that film. And then, like I said, I've spent the last 18 months creating Beyond Reason, which is much more of a technical challenge for me. I was interviewing people and I was researching the material. I mean, when I did Beyond Me, I knew what I wanted to do, and it went very fast. But this one, I wasn't. It really shifted a lot over the last 18 months. But it was a great feeling finishing Beyond Reason, because it wasn't just finishing a film; it was finishing the full trilogy, and it was quite a sense of accomplishment.
I think it's interesting because you keep saying, well, I decided to write a book and I decided to make a movie, but was it really you that decided, or did you just agree with it?
I believe that the film Inception is based on some truth. And that's a lot of the, in Vedanta, there's this sort of thing that you are not the doer, which is a really hard thing to get your mind around. That you're not in control at all, and you're not doing anything, that things are just happening. But yeah, you busted me on that one pretty good. Who decided what? Who knows? What is free will anyway? But yeah, these thoughts came to me, and I'm going to do this, and I just started working on it.
I was being interviewed. This was years ago on Shirley MacLaine's radio show, and we got into this whole conversation about free will, because I guess she's a proponent of free will. You can do whatever you want. And my belief is, well, you can do whatever you want as long as it's what the inspiration is telling you to do, and you can do what they say or choose not to and then get your butt kicked. Spiritually get your butt kicked.
If you have traits and tendencies that have taken 200,000 years to form over 25 different lifetimes, and that's controlling your entire mental fabric, where's the free will? I mean, you may think you're making choices, but if your entire software operating system has taken a million years to form, there's not really much free will going on. At least that's my view.
See, and I really believe that those little voices in our head that say, "Hey, maybe you should make a film. Maybe you should write a book. Maybe you should go to school and get your PhD, and as soon as you're done, write a book." It's like, okay, thanks. I've just learned to agree. It's like, even after I argue, it's like, well, I don't know that I really want to do that. Oh, maybe you should have a radio show. Oh, and start it in January and have a web page up. And it's like, God, I don't know. For me, they're very pushy. But they're always right. And I think for you, they were pretty right on too.
It's just a matter of listening, right? And it's intuition and just being able to tune into that and know. Just most people are not tuned in, and there's so much distractions going on with their gadgets and everything else. I mean, it's not just gadgets that they can't hear. And you're talking about all these indigenous cultures around the world where they were completely tuned in. Their whole lives were built around listening to that inner voice and going with what they were being told.
And it's just so sad that we no longer honor that at all. Or in the Western world, I'll say in the Western world.
It's, these things go. I would have to tell you, after all I've been through, I've never been more optimistic about humanity as I am right now.
Say why?
Because on one hand, the trajectory we're on is not sustainable, and on the other hand, the trajectory we're on is not sustainable. I mean, it looks really bad, and it looks like we're going over a cliff. But you have to say, okay, well, this has got to change. We're not going to do this. So I believe that there is a tremendous shift coming. A lot of this hocus pocus on, online is, like you were saying before about, ascension, and I don't know how much of that's real, but I do believe in simple terms that there is a very positive shift coming.
Well, I agree. The question I always ask is it a shift we are going to take on because we choose it, or is it a shift that will happen because a choice is forced upon us? and you don't even have to answer that because we don't know.
Right, it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
We're all asleep, right? We're in our personal dreams, and we're having one collective dream. So this collective dream we're in is this Maya, this illusion, and you're basically asking, what is the form of the alarm clock? Is the alarm clock going to be one of these really, really harsh alarm clocks that jars you out of bed in the middle of the night, or is it going to be the soft little alarm clock? Who knows? But the alarm clock will wake us up, and people are going to come out of this slumber that we're in.
Won't that be nice?
It will be nice. It definitely will be. Yeah. And,
so I think you mentioned this, that you actually went to India to do filming.
Correct.
So what was that like?
Geez,
have you ever been there before?
I had gone there. There was an Art of Living 25th anniversary celebration in 2006, but I had only gone there for 2 weeks, and it was all extremely insular. You were part of this package, and you went there and you came back, and 2 weeks is not enough, and especially since most of it was not really doing anything. This time I was there 4 months. I lived there. I lived there. I actually didn't even travel very much. I was there on an Art of Living ashram in Bangalore for most of the time, and then I traveled with the founder for a few weeks, and we went to Rishikesh and Jaipur and Udaipur and in a lot of different places. I made a lot of friends there. It's very strange. The people are so nice and loving and frustrating the crap out of me at the same time, because the way they operate is so slow and so, pedantic. They'll have you'll go through one registration process. This is everywhere in India, where in the West it would be 5 minutes with one person. There it's an hour and a half, and you're dealing. By the time you're done, you've gone to 4 different desks and dealt with 6 different people, and it's just how India is. It's kind of funny. India is very sad in a lot of ways. Their wealth was robbed, looted. I forget, 700 boatloads of gold in England stole a couple hundred years ago. But what England did more than anything is they stole India's identity. They have a cultural-wide identity disorder, basically. You have India's history goes back 7,000 years. I mean, Krishna lived 5,000 years ago. Rama lived 7,000 years ago. And there's a lot of historical evidence that says that these books and all this stuff, all these things really happened, all these legends. And the British showed up there and said, no, the planet's this 6,000 years old. These books can't be true. This past that you claim is not true. And basically robbed the entire culture of their identity. And they're struggling to reclaim it. They're becoming very westernized, which is not good. It's almost like they're drawing the worst from Western culture. There's a lot of pollution. It's not a. There's a billion people there, and the government system is not very well working. There's a lot of corruption within the government, so it's fascinating. I can't wait to go back. I miss it. Like I said, I made a lot of friends, and I can't wait to go back there someday. Soon, in fact, I want to do a lot of shooting of Beyond Thought there. There's a Rishi there I know who would be brilliant in the film. I mean, if when you ever see Beyond Thought, you'll know why I went to India, because this guy's so good at being able to take these esoteric and abstract concepts and make them tangible.
So is this going to be like a 4th movie in the series, or is it going to start like a new series, or you don't know yet?
I thought I was finished, because in this Buddhism, or whatever you want to call it, all these different traditions that come out of the same lineage, you don't want to identify yourself with anything. You want to lose all those associations. And I thought, okay, I'm finished with this. And I wasn't really even sure what I was going to do next. And I have another film I want to do more on Jesus than Beyond Belief, a lot more detailed. Like I said, I've been honing my skills, my camera work, and all. As you do this, you get better, and you want to do more, and you want to extend yourself. But the Jesus one probably won't be beyond something. But a few weeks ago, I just had this inspirational Beyond Thought, and I was like, wow, I could do such a good job with that. So I don't, I want to sort of disassociate myself from the whole franchise, because you don't want to be tagged in a spiritual life. You just want to be separate. Who knows, Rita? I could do.
They haven't told you yet. I know.
They haven't told me. I can do another 10 films, or I might do one more. It's fun. It's, like I said, it's something that I have the technical ability to do, and you can certainly write books or try, do blog posts, write for Huffington Post, or do whatever to try to reach people. And to me, my niche is I can take knowledge, simplify it, and educate people through free films. So that's what I do.
The other choice is that you could go back to doing software engineering. You could go to India and do telephonic support.
Oh my God. Oh, that's not funny. I know
that's not funny.
I know you're trying to be funny, but that's really.
But I'm just saying, you're like, well, I don't know. It's like, but the other choice would be, well, you could go back and step into that old world that you were in. But I kind of get a big no on that.
Well, we didn't cover this. Maybe we did last time we spoke.
No, I don't think we ever really talked about that whole thing, or very briefly.
Right.
Go ahead.
So we're talking on Skype right now. I actually invented Skype. I mean, not really, but I did. And I invented Siri too, the voice recognition on Apple. And I'll never get credit for either. My product that was a Skype, product was called Companion. I did it 13 years ago, 12 years ago. It was actually superior to Skype. It also had sort of YouTube functionality built into it. And this was 4 years before anyone had ever heard of YouTube or Skype. Skype got bought for $3 billion. YouTube got bought for $3 billion, and I got fired. And this was while my best friend and soulmate was losing her battle with breast cancer. So my life was kind of a train wreck back in the day. It's all good. I wouldn't be here talking to you about all this great stuff if it weren't for that. But yeah, I'm a little bitter when it comes to stuff.
But let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Are you happier now? Are you happier now?
Oh, of course. Like I said, if you were to have met me 10, 12 years ago and see me now, you would be saying, I'll have what's that line from Sleepless in Seattle, or is the other one? I'll have some of what she's having. I want some of what he, what changed, because it's been dramatic. My mom passed away this last summer, and I went back to California, and I've got 6 brothers and a sister. And it was the first time we'd all been together in a long, long time. But at the same time, it was also the first time I could see myself juxtaposed against, my siblings, and really seeing such a stark change. I can say, oh my God, how is it that, I was very chill, I was like this enlightened person amongst all these people. It's kind of funny. They're probably all thinking, who the hell does this guy think he is? Some silly shit. But I could really see, and I was almost tearing up, like, wow, how is it that I'm so lucky to have escaped that nightmare, and had successfully pulled myself out of it. So, yeah, it's been, I'm certainly, it's night and day. I'm obviously much happier than I was then.
I have a friend who had not the same circumstance, but, had a very high profile job, and through a number of circumstances ended up leaving the field permanently. And, but he's a much happier person now, and because we've just known each other, for the last 5 or 6 years. And I said, I don't know if I would have even liked you if you were that person, that was working in these high power jobs, because I think you would have been a dick. Excuse my French, but that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't have wanted to go out and have a beer with me, for sure. It's not a nice industry, and it changed a lot in the 90s. In the 80s, it was a lot of fun. I got there. Apple was this tiny computer when I got there, and it was such a playground for me, at least in the 80s. And then, in the 90s, it became very cutthroat, and in the .com boom. In fact, my friend, I say that she died from .com disease. She She felt the lump, and I never knew about this, like the time that she got hired. But she didn't go see a doctor until the day her company went public. And so she became a paper millionaire on the same day she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she was working, instead of just telling her boss, hey, I think I'm sick or whatever, she worked herself to death in the same frenzy that, everybody's trying to become millionaires and all this stuff. It's quite sad what it does to people's personalities. It destroys a lot of lives. I mean, Steve Jobs destroyed a ton of lives, with Apple Computer, forcing people to work weekends and all kinds of stuff.
See, we're hanging around in the same stomping grounds. I mean, I spent 15 years in the Bay Area working electronic startup companies.
Back in the day.
Back in the day when it was fun.
So I did want to put a little pitch out.
Yes, please do.
I'm trying to raise money for Beyond Thought. And if anyone wants to write me a check for $5,000, that would be sweet. Otherwise, I'm going to have to get it in much smaller denominations. You can go directly to my site, beyondmefilm.com, and there's a convenient donate button on the corner. If you like the films and you want to kick back a few bucks in appreciation and gratitude, that would be great. Or you can kill two birds with one stone, and there's a 3 DVD box set that I've got produced, and I'm asking for a $35 donation. Again, that's just a recommended donation amount. And for a $35 donation, I'll ship you out a copy of all 3 films, postage included.
And I think it's a good investment in yourself. I mean, I really enjoyed this last movie. I'm going to have to watch Beyond Me because I don't think I've seen it.
That's great. My recommendation is, from what I've been hearing from a lot of people, is that Beyond Reason it's very deep. It's a little bit, there's a quote at the very start of the film that says, and it's this ancient Vedic quote that says, sometimes we need to use a thorn to remove a thorn, and then we throw away both. And what they're talking about in that quote is sometimes we need to use our intellects to get the intellect out of the way. The intellect eventually becomes an obstruction in our personal evolution. And so the film is sort of like a thorn that way. And if you want to be entertained, you can go watch Bruce Willis shoot up Russians or something. But this is not a piece of entertainment. But it's very deep. And what I've heard consistently from a lot of people is that the second time they watch Beyond Reason, they get so much more out of it. So I would say watch Beyond Reason, then go watch Beyond Me and Beyond Belief, and then watch Beyond Reason again. And it'll be, it's life-changing. There's a lot of knowledge in these 3 films.
Well, and I think even if the individual is very intellectual and, likes watching the science shows on TV and, about wormholes and, that kind of stuff, it will even satisfy that kind of person's mind.
That's the target demographic. It's like, how do you go, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's a challenge to say to anybody, even you, hey, Rita, why don't you go check out Art of Living? There's always some resistance. And depending on who you're talking to, the resistance is going to be a little bit different. And so it's always a challenge, again, because of this, exactly the topic of this film, of the history of the modern scientific method and thought, and how thought itself was evolved because of, Laplace and Descartes and all these people. And so I really wanted to use, the modern scientific method to look at the modern scientific method and say, hey, so it's meant to apply to that Western analytical mind. That's the target, the guide, to say, hey, look, it's great. Science is great. We can splice genes together and we can do all these great, awesome things, but it's got limitations. There's obvious problems with science that it has areas that it can never go beyond, and it's beyond those boundaries. It's beyond those boundary conditions that therein lie the answers to all the great questions that humanity holds most dear.
And I found it, you'll understand where I'm going with this. There was just an energy in it. When we were on the break, I was sharing this with you, but I'll share it with the listeners because I think you could expand on it. When I was watching it, I was kind of in a bad mood. And while I was watching it and just kind of getting into the movie and just, kind of participating, I felt like in the movie, I could feel my upset, my frustration, my whatever that I was holding on to just drained from me. And by the time the movie was done, unlike watching Bruce Willis, I felt a lot better. You know, like there was some kind of healing vibration in what they were saying or how they were saying it. Do you understand what I mean?
Sure. It's the dulcet tones of Frank Huguenard. No, absolutely. And I've gotten this out of all three films, and it's been I don't know, you can't, I don't want to be sounding egoistic or anything, but you can't teach that. And I wanted to go out of my way to not be preachy, to not be, promulgating or posture. What is it that evangelists do? I didn't want to be an evangelistic kind of guy out there beating on the drum and saying this is it. You just want to present this information in the most, sanitary way that you can. So just give people the opportunity to make up their own minds. With Beyond Reason, there's really an effort there to go and look at, different paradigms, and it was very difficult, and I went through a lot of revisions with the film, different focus groups on how to map the two. There's two distinct storylines, if you will, in the film. There's the scientist, and then there's the spiritualist, if you will, or you could say the Western scientist and the spiritual scientist, maybe is a better way of saying it. And they tend to merge at the end of the film in a way that kind of brings them both together in a satisfying way. At least it was satisfying for me to find out how to finally get that accomplished. It was tricky. And I really appreciate your kind words. There were times I was thinking, man, this is just not working. I mean, I'm kind of, what am I going to do? I've been working on this 18 months, but then it just all came together.
But that's the beauty of it. And I bet you probably got to that point where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to put it down for a minute. And then it was like, bing, oh yeah, I could do this.
Several times. Yeah, I would. I mean, I wasn't working on it straight 18 months. I would put it down, and then, like when I came across this Kenny Felder guy, it was like that. I had put it down, and then all of a sudden within, is exactly what you're saying. Between the time that I Googled him and prior to that, I had probably hadn't worked on the project in 4 months. Between the time I Googled North Carolina quantum physicist and the time I had him in front of my camera was probably 72 hours or something like that. So yeah, it's funny how you just kind of put things away and you work on other stuff, and then all of a sudden things just pop.
So why is that guy teaching high school? Did you ever ask?
Right, and you can tell it sort of makes sense when you watch the film that's why he's so good. I wanted to get John Hagland or Gary Zukav or actually Amit Goswami, who was in What the Bleep, actually had agreed to be in this. And then some scheduling conflict, it didn't happen. And I, of course, wanted to have a trailer with, these, not really Stanton Friedman, but, you mentioned this conference. You want to have those names there where people want to watch the film. But the reason why Kenny is so good is exactly because he's a high school teacher and he's used to talking to 15, 16, 17-year-old kids and explaining complicated things, in a way that's exciting. It turns out
in a way that you can understand it too.
Exactly, and not only understand it, but he's so compelling. He makes you want to, just the way his gestures are and his enthusiasm. But his story is interesting. He's not just a high school teacher. In fact, this academic, arrogant guy that panned my film and hated it was like, who the hell is this high school teacher? Why am I listening to a high school teacher? It's like, you arrogant, I'm going to swear here, drop an F-bomb on your show. But it's like, God, you arrogant jerk. This guy, he's a million times brilliant than you will ever be. Anyway, it's a high school teacher, turns out, graduated from North Carolina State University, 15, 20 years ago. Started a software company in his garage, went off and made, finished the company, built up the company, sold it to Microsoft for millions of dollars, and now he's back giving back to community. Of course, this academic, arrogant jerk didn't know that. He's just being condescending. Well, this blah, 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 blah. But, how cool is that this guy is, he made his millions, now he's giving back and teaching high school kids. He's a wonderful guy.
But that is really cool. and I bet he's like living his bliss too.
For sure. I mean, that's part of the brilliance. I mean, like I said, all the stars aligned. I mean, I had been researching, and I started off this film. In the first two films, the only person sort of interviewed was me, which was easy, right? I kind of scripted out my lines, and I would get in front of the camera and, kind of massage, wordsmith the words a little bit to get them to sound with the right cadence. Sometimes when you write them down and you say them out loud, it doesn't sound as well. So you have to massage it and do several takes. But you're in complete control of the process. You can keep doing it until you like it. If I get 10 minutes with one of the great gurus of India, that's it. And if he doesn't, if he doesn't say what I want him to, how I want him to, in the right way, and he's, with good English and all this, that's it. But all that prep work got me into position where when I met Kenny, I was ready. And he was just, he knocked it out of the park. He was very good at just being interesting and compelling.
So other than, everybody should, watch and donate or buy your films, that's an obvious one. But what can people do to start them on this path or, learn more about the Vedantic way?
Right. So, and again, to be non-evangelical, I would say you can go to tm.org, dhamma.org, which is Vipassana Self-Realization Fellowship, which is probably srf.org. But, if you want my personal recommendation, go to artofliving.org. This is a big part of the current shift, the vibrational shift that's happening on this planet. The thing that sets the art of living apart from all the other Vedantic traditions is something called Sudarshan Kriya, which is a rhythmic breathing exercise, which is sort of new, which is kind of weird because you've got this 4,000-year-old tradition, and yet someone's come up and say, oh, by the way, we've got meditation, we've got yoga, we're vegetarian, we promote this, and here's the knowledge, blah, 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 and we have Sudarshan Kriya. But Sudarshan Kriya is an extremely powerful breathing technique that's taught and encouraged. We know, and in fact it's talked about in this film, that there's a link between our emotions and our breath. You have a corresponding rhythmic breathing pattern. If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're grateful, all these different emotions, you're going to be breathing differently. And so what the Sudarshan Kriya does is it sort of breaks that link by having sort of a structured breathing cycle. And it's an extremely powerful purification process. Kriya is a Sanskrit word that just means purification process. Sudarshan means right vision. So if right vision, you can assume, given that the right vision would be seeing the truth for what it is and not seeing the illusion, you can draw your own conclusion about what Sudarshan is supposed to mean. Anyway, Sudarshan Kriya has been scientifically proven, again, using modern science, to lower cholesterol, to lower cortisol, the human stress hormone. People sleep better, they become more creative. It helps break addictions. It helps, we have programs with soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's a very comprehensive technique that, when used in conjunction with meditation, it makes both of them even much more powerful. It's a synergistic effect. So that's my recommendation. Excuse me, Art of Living. I make the point in this film, Beyond Reason, that I talk about swimming, that if I were going to teach you how to swim, I can draw you pictures on the drawing board, and I can talk about all the different kinds of strokes, and we can sit around and watch videos of swimming. But at the end of the day, you got to get into the water, and Vedanta is exactly the same thing. I can fill up your radio shows for the next 10 years. We can talk about it, but at some point, people are going to have to actually begin to use the techniques and practices themselves.
And other than the kind of weird, unpronounceable Indian words that are there, is there anything weird? Is there ritual animal sacrifice on Thursday afternoon, or, they're not doing anything weird or scary there? I mean, got to take care of that, if I meditate, I'm going to burn in hell fear of people approaching someplace like that, because, and I hate to say this, but in the Western world, we get exposed to words like Vedanta, and we're like, well, what the heck is that? Where I think like TM, they totally westernized that whole thing, and it made it be a lot more approachable for people.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Art of Living by itself is the same sort of thing. In TM, when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi showed up in 1957, I think, if you can imagine, an Indian yogi showing up in Los Angeles in the late 50s, everybody's got crew cuts and you know the scene, how that would have gone over. And so they were promoting Vedanta, basically. I mean, everything, like I said, underneath all these organizations is Vedanta. They were promoting stress relief, which is, it's sort of true that, the TM does provide stress relief, but anybody who's been within TM organization for a couple months, not to mention a few years, knows that that's not really what TM is. TM is Vedanta. It's this whole package. And so here we are, almost 55 years later, and I think society is actually starting, for a couple of reasons. One, people are starting to realize that what we're doing isn't working. You look at Sandy Hook and Aurora and Fukushima and Afghanistan and Iraq and all, the banking crisis, all the stuff that our system is, people are miserable and they're looking for something different. And at the same time, people are becoming, because of TM and because of a lot of what Paramahamsa Yogananda and Swami Vivekananda did 120 years ago, people in this country seem to be a lot more receptive and open to, different techniques and different traditions and taking a look at them and finding out if there's anything. In answer to your first question, there are some pretty weird rituals. No, actually there aren't. I was going to try to be funny, but it's all, that to me was maybe one of the biggest surprises or whatever. It's just, it's all vanilla stuff, and it's all, we all have an intellect, and that intellect is listening to me talk or listening to a professor talk, or listening to somebody, listening maybe to a politician or whatever. And the intellect is sitting there either nodding yes or not, or shaking their head no, constantly with every word, trying, is what he's saying right, or is what he's saying not right, And when you're listening to someone and your mind is like, no, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. And what people will discover, I think this is sort of universal, is that when you're listening to someone talking about Vedanta or a Vedantic teacher or a practitioner, that part of the brain, that intellect that's saying, no, that's not right, it's just not triggering. There's just so much about it that's like, okay, that sounds right, that sounds right, that sounds right. And then they say, okay, then go and try these techniques and verify whether that's true or not. So it's very non-threatening in that way. And again, this is made in the film. It's a universal scientific approach. So people who are Christians or Islam or Hindus or whatever, Judaism, whatever tradition they belong to, using these practices doesn't ask you to, vacate whatever tradition you're a part of. It only enhances those experiences.
So this isn't any kind of, I'm going to kind of throw a couple of things out. This isn't, one, any kind of religion. And then two, if people have done like yoga, for example, which is also out of India, they wouldn't really experience anything necessarily that would fall outside of something that they might have done at their gym. Kinda.
What I got into Art of Living because I did vinyasa yoga in California for a year after my friend passed away. I needed to do something, but I was really leery of anything to do with spiritual. It was just sort of like a gym where I was being very physical. And I have to say that actually the asana, yoga actually means almost everything. Vedanta and yoga are almost synonymous, except in this country, yoga just means the asanas, the physical postures. And so you have to kind of be careful with that. As far as if I'm saying, oh yeah, yoga means this, because people already have these connotations in their mind. And the yoga that we do within Art of Living is really light compared to what, people here in the West are very physical, and then they'll take on something like yoga and really go at it. It's not a religion. It's specifically not a religion, and you'll see the examples of that in so many different places of, how these teachers and these masters and these gurus go out of their way to ensure and guarantee that after they pass away, that it's not religionized, that people just adhere to a certain set of practices, and that's not turned into a religion. I mean, Osho died. There's no religion. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi died a few years ago. TM hasn't turned into a religion, right? So this is sort of one of the
cult.
Right. No, it's very, like I said, intellectually, when you start to, if you've got an open mind and you say, okay, I'm going to go, Frank said it, go try this out, I'm going to go try it out. And if you do that with an open yet skeptical mind, you're going to find that there's a lot of it that you're just not going to say no to. That intellect part of your mind says, well, that's not right. That's not right. But you have to be able to accept sort of, I was talking with a lady the other day, and she used the word scaffolding. If you're doing a scientific experiment or process, the scaffolding is all the definitions and the axioms and the assumptions and the postulates and the hypotheses that you build up to the point where you can get a theory. And the theory being what? That you are God, that there is no separation. Separation is an illusion caused by the ego, and we can verify that this theory is true or not by, through meditation, blah, 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 and experiencing the self and becoming self-realized. And if you have that kind of scientific approach and you accept and you start labeling and accepting what's the framework, where's that scaffolding, I don't think any Westerner will really have a problem with understanding this stuff. It's really not threatening at all.
Well, the music is going to start like now, and so we need to wrap it up. But I'm so glad. All right, this sounds terrible, and I'm kind of glad that our first hour guest wasn't here so that I got to spend 2 whole hours with you.
Yes, look what I manifested.
That's right.
It's been really wonderful, Rita, and I'll let you know as soon as Beyond Thought's finished, if not beforehand.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Frank. And everybody, go to beyondmefilm.com and, donate some money or buy the CD set so we can finish the film, and then we can talk about it here on the show. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Frank. And I will talk to you later, okay?
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. That was Frank Huguenard. His website is beyondmefilm.com. And next week, man, we're changing it around. This week, we were kind of doing a spirituality thing. Next week, we're moving to UFOs. We're talking about crop circles with Patty Greer and alien contact with Ed Cormack in the second hour. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. That's Bitsy barking. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.